Looking out a dirty old window, down below the cars in the city go rushing by. I sit here alone and I wonder why. Friday night and everyone's moving. I can feel the heat, but it's soothing, heading down. I search for the beat in this dirty town. Downtown, the young ones are going. Downtown, the young ones are going. We're the kids in America. We're the kids in America. Everybody lives for the music around.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the fourth of my 32 team previews that I'm doing in anticipation of the Madden 21 Better League cycle, that of young Alex's Buffalo Bills. I am your host, Connor Rice, and I'm pretty excited for this one. I mean, young Alex, obviously, a user who has shown throughout his Better League career, which is admittedly a short one, but he's shown throughout his Better League career that he can be pretty solid. He can get some upset wins here and there. He can, put the scare into some good users. He's definitely a user that is capable of making a playoff run, a user that is capable of taking this Bills team, which, as you'll see, has some good pieces and has some good things to build on, and turning it into a juggernaut moving forward. I say a relative juggernaut because, he's got Ocho and Austin in his division, but, doing his thing over in Buffalo, I think young Alex can do a good job. As always, we will get into all of the units, their strengths, their weaknesses. This time, the contract info is updated. It's much clearer now, and it shows where they actually are in their contracts instead of what the full contract was. Thank you once again to Ben for pointing that out for me before we got too far into the series, because that would have been bad. Delving right into the Buffalo Bills, we begin, as always, with quarterback room. And Josh Allen will, of course, be the presumptive starting quarterback. As you can see real quick, instead of just having like the contract, I have the cap hit that they have per year, or at least for this upcoming season, and then I have their free agency year, meaning that's dumb, but meaning the year in which they hit free agency, obviously. And it's pretty nice because the number that's at the end here, like 2023 for Josh Allen, 2021 for Matt Barkley, that's also how many years they have left on their contract, so just treat it like that. Obviously, Josh Allen is going to be a Madden quarterback that's probably going to be a lot more feared and a lot more lethal than what his 77 overall would indicate. 99 throw power, the only quarterback in the Better League, yes, including Patrick Mahomes, to have 99 throw power. He can get it quite literally pretty much anywhere on the field he wants, and with a velocity too, and that's something that I'm sure young Alex will use to its fullest extent. The accuracy stats aren't great necessarily. They're definitely in the bottom 10 of starting quarterbacks, but they're not terrible. You can build on the high 70s, especially given that he's still 24 years old. He'll still, I believe, have accelerated development. I think it's star development, if I remember correctly. And of course, you have 3 more years on that rookie scale, with only around $6 million cap hit. So that's good from Josh Allen's perspective. And not only does he have a cannon for an arm, not only can he be accurate at least most of the time, but he does have 85 speed, 87 excel, and he's a big body that can potentially, run through some people if need be. So Josh Allen, a very strong Madden quarterback. Of course, one could argue whether he was disrespected or not with the 77 overall. I personally think that's right around probably where he deserves to be, but despite that relatively low overall, Josh Allen, a very, very dangerous Madden quarterback. The backup will probably be Jake Fromm, I would imagine. I mean, there's no way that Alex is going to re-sign Matt Barkley past this season, and I would imagine that Jake Fromm's probably going to see some garbage time minutes in the games that Alex is winning comfortably. We'll see, obviously, what games I expect those to be in the schedule portion of this video, but I expect it to be Josh Allen and Jake Fromm moving forward. Jake Fromm, obviously, only 82 throw power, pretty rough from that standpoint. It's going to be pretty difficult to develop Jake Fromm into a usable Madden quarterback, but as long as you have him as your backup and as long as you focus pretty much purely on getting his throw power up to, the mid to high 80s, I do expect, especially given that he'll be on that rookie scale for 4 more years, I do expect Jake Fromm to be the backup. But Josh Allen, a very, very strong Madden quarterback, one that should be feared by everyone in the AFC East. CCMS, I know what divisions teams are in occasionally when I've looked them up beforehand. The running game, and this is absolutely, in my opinion, the worst part of this Buffalo Bills offense in terms of the units. Of course, Devin Singletary, very young, under $1 million per year in terms of the cap hit, and he still has 3 years on that scale. But, I mean, the 86 speed kind of makes him a non-starter, honestly. Like, it's going to be extremely difficult, borderline impossible, honestly, unless young Alex just gets sticky beyond belief. It's going to be pretty difficult to have Devin Singletary break big in any meaningful way, get any meaningful chunk plays. It's going to be a whole lot of 3 yards in a cloud of dust from Singletary and Yeldon. Tywan Jones, obviously, he's the only one who has, like, usable speed, honestly, of the three, but he's 32 years old and his contract's expiring after this year, so he's definitely not someone you want to build off of. I'd probably really aggressively try to either trade for a running back as soon as possible or, go after one in free agency. But if he does decide to stick with Devin Singletary, Singletary does have very good change of direction. We seem to think as a league that change of direction is going to be an extremely important stat on both sides of the ball, and he does have 92, which is, tied for 6th highest among running backs. That's very solid. His spin move's okay. His juke move is outright elite. Well, not elite, but very, very good. So Singletary usable in some ways, but again, I mean, that 86 speed is really rough, and I don't expect to see Devin Singletary get a whole lot of, 10-plus yard gains. It's going to be a bit of a grind, I think, in the running game for this Buffalo Bills offense. But, Singletary, Yeldon, they've had success before, in real life, so we'll see what young Alex is able to do there. But again, I would probably trade for a running back or go after one in free agency as soon as possible. There are some decent running backs still in free agency, so, and, depending on how we do the free agency draft, I know that young Alex got a pretty bad pick. I mean, not in terms of the team, but in terms of like where he was in the lottery. So he's going to get a pretty high free agency pick. Maybe look to the halfback position when you get there. In terms of the wide receiving core, very, very solid all the way around. It is, of course, headlined by Stephon Diggs, who isn't in that, like, elite pantheon of wide receivers, like, the Julio Joneses, the Michael Thomases, but he is absolutely in that next tier, and his 4 abilities rack him up deep in elite. Jukebox will be especially dangerous in the open field, and grab and go makes Stephon Diggs one of the most feared, rack, yards after catch, wide receivers in the league. He will be absolutely lethal in that regard. I mean, he's incredibly, extraordinarily well balanced, honestly, when you look at, his physical stats, his receiving stats. He's very solid in all categories. Again, I'll say it again. He's not at that Julio tier. He's not at that Michael Thomas tier, but he is at that next tier up. And given that his contract does not expire until 2024, Stephon Diggs will be a feared weapon coming out of Buffalo for the vast majority of the cycle, if not the whole thing. I would look specifically, at the route running stats, 94, 93, 93, respectively. He can, Stephon can make any route he works. And again, with the paired with the abilities that he has, I expect young Alex to really try to scheme to get Stephon Diggs open as much as possible and to feed that man. When you look at the rest of the wide receiving core, Cole Beasley just kind of solid all the way around. Unfortunately, only 87 speed. It makes him kind of tough to run anything but like West Coast concepts with him, but he's not bad as, maybe a slot receiver. John Brown and Robert Foster. I do think, you see that Robert Foster is an expiring contract. I do think that Foster is going to prove himself, to be pretty important to this Buffalo Bills team moving forward, purely because of that 94 speed. He is the fastest wide receiver on the team, and he has solid, despite his low overall, he has solid catching stats. His route running isn't the best necessarily, but I do think Robert Foster can be effective. I do think young Alex will be able to know how to use him. I would look for Robert Foster to potentially have the second most receiving yards in this team, of course, behind Stephon Diggs. I mean, that one's obvious. And the tight end is Trash, who will be used primarily in lead blocking. He will not be targeted in the passing game. I'm just telling you now. You see the route running, you see the speed. It's just not happening. But if I remember correctly, I think he has decent run blocking. So, get those jumbo packages in there and just let Lee Smith dominate in that regard. We will not see him in the receiving game. This is my projected starting offensive line. It's a pretty interesting one. I mean, there is a 74 overall right tackle whose name I'm forgetting, but he's also like 32. He's on his deathbed. So I do think that young Alex will probably take the slight regression in year one in order to develop Cody Ford into hopefully, a starting quality right tackle moving forward, especially given that he has, again, as you can see, 3 more years on that rookie scale. As far as Mitch Morse goes, he is obviously the highest overall on this team, but it's still, there are no elite offensive linemen in this on this team, Mitch Morse is definitely a power blocker. You can see he's got 92 strength, which again, I have no idea if that matters in Madden. Something tells me it doesn't, but he is also top 10 in pass blocking overall, as well as number 4 in power pass blocking. So as far as, interior blocking goes, Mitch Morse, at least for the next couple seasons, will be a very solid interior offensive lineman there at that center position. As far as the rest of the offensive line goes, it's going to be pretty tough. None of them really excel at anything, to be honest with you, but it's also not an awful offensive line. Other than Cody Ford initially, but again, I'm assuming that he'll go up a couple overall within that first season. It's not a horrible offensive line by any stretch, but it is absolutely a weakness within this Bills offense. It's not going to give Josh Allen, the longest of pockets, the most protection, I should say, in the world. So that is absolutely something that young Alex is going to figure out in terms of prioritizing where to go. John Feliciano is probably the odd man out here in terms of, he's not good at run blocking or pass blocking. He's pretty bad at both of those, and he is on an expiring contract for next year. So I do not expect to see Feliciano to start more than 1 year in Buffalo. That does it for the offense. As far as top 3 positives and top 3 negatives go, as always, we begin with the positives because this is a positive show, unless I don't like you. Of course, when I say the human cannon, I refer to Josh Allen. I cannot emphasize it enough. He's going to be an incredible Madden quarterback for young Alex. He has the speed. Again, it's not like this year, it's not like only quarterbacks with escape artists are going to be able to run the ball. It looks like they've kind of bounced it out a little bit more, and that 85 speed is going to be helpful. And then the 99 throw power. He'll figure out the accuracy. Alex will figure out which routes work and which routes don't for the Buffalo Bills for Josh Allen. But again, that 99 throw power, it opens up the entire field, and I expect Diggs and company to cook because of it. And I expect I expect Josh Allen to be a very, very solid Madden quarterback moving forward for young Alex. Diggs plus speed, I say this, of course, I've kind of waxed poetic about the wide receiving course. I'm not going to go too much into it, but, not only do you have Stefon Diggs, it's not a one-man show because you also have John Brown and Robert Foster, both of whom are going to be, despite their relatively low overalls, they're going to be very, very competent Madden wide receivers. They've got the physical stats. They'll boost their route running up a little bit, and they should be good to go there. This Buffalo Bills wide receiving core definitely runs at least 3 deep in that regard. Again, we'll see how much Cole Beasley gets used in this Buffalo Bills scheme. I don't expect him to get targeted a ton. And then finally, there are few key expiring contracts. I can't, off the top of my head, obviously we'll get to the contract situation later. There's not a single offensive player in the starting lineup that I think is a must re-sign necessarily for the Buffalo Bills. And that's good because that means they can keep, pretty much the entirety of this core together for at least 2 seasons if they want to. There are no real key expiring contracts on this Buffalo Bills offense. So good stuff there for young Alex. He's got an offensive core to build around, and I expect him to be able to for sure moving forward. In terms of top 3 negatives, I've already mentioned the lack of options at halfback. Devin Singletary is slow, although otherwise solid. TJ Yeldon doesn't really give you too much. And then the third stringer, whose name I'm forgetting, I do apologize for that, even though I just brought him up. He is, on the wrong side of 30 and an expiring contract. So I don't think we'll see him get a lot of touches, even though he is, again, by far the most physically gifted running back on this Buffalo Bills team. I expect it to be a lot of Devin Singletary, or maybe, if young Alex takes my advice, another halfback whose name we don't know yet, potentially. The Mitch Morse contract, is pretty tough. Again, he does have 3 more years. He's the best offensive lineman by default, but he's 28 years old. He's gonna regress. I don't believe is on any kind of accelerated development, so I expect his attributes to go down pretty rapidly, and especially by the time you get to that 3rd year, to that expiring year, he's gonna be a below average interior lineman on a massive, massive deal. Again, when you consider I should say a massive cap hit, especially when you consider that all of the contracts are backloaded in Madden. Something you'd think they would have fixed by Madden 21, but I guess not. I guess we're going to have to wait another 5 years for them to add that. But the Mitch Morse contract is definitely a negative in that regard. I mean, again, he's not a bad center. He's like totally fine, totally competent, but 3 more years of regression on a large contract that will not look good in year 3 in the 2022 season. And then the third negative, I think, is, if Josh Allen does go down, there's a pretty massive drop-off. Matt Barkley has very low throw power, and honestly, the power and accuracy stats are pretty bad. He's somewhat mobile, but that's honestly kind of it. Like, he can't really throw the ball, and as a quarterback, that's kind of a deal breaker. So, yeah, Josh Allen, you got to wrap him in styrofoam, just make sure that Josh Allen does not get injured, and watch out for the bounty system coming from me and coming from the rest of the AFC East. We move on to the defense, and I do believe that the Buffalo Bills are going to run a 4-3. I mean, this is, I think, the most obvious scheme fit to a roster that I've seen so far of the 4 ones that I've done. If they don't run a 4-3, at least in year 1, young Alex is an idiot, but we knew that already. As far as the defensive line goes, I do have AJ Epinesa starting early at left end. He is obviously, the weakness within this defensive line, but you got to dev him, even though he only has normal dev. He is 21, so you're still going to be able to boost up his stats relatively quickly despite that normal dev. And of course, there weren't any other ends that were significantly better than Epinesa, so I think that's a pretty clear, a pretty obvious starting choice in my opinion. Just try to dev Epinesa, and then by the end of his rookie contract, he'll probably be a very solid end in that situation. Obviously, Ed Oliver's the highlight here, only 22 years old, on his, I believe, the 2nd year of his career, if I remember, and very, very solid in all categories. Obviously, he's a power defensive tackle first. He specializes in that. Very good at shutting down the run. He will be very solid moving forward. And again, much like Epinesa, he has another 4 years on his contract, so that's very solid. Very, very solid from young Alex's perspective there. Left end defensive tackle, he doesn't have to worry about either of those positions really for the rest of the cycle, if I'm being honest. Jerry Hughes, of course, is on the wrong side of 30, but he will be pretty solid at least for the first, really only the first year, if I'm being honest. He's probably going to progress pretty hard after that. But the first year, he's very solid. He's 8th overall among right ends in finesse moves, 7th in pursuit. He is, at least in year 1, he is an above average pass rusher, an above average disruptor in that regard. So with Epinesa, hopefully deving, with Jerry Hughes being solid at least for year 1, I can expect, probably an average pass rush capability from young Alex's perspective. The unfortunate thing is, of course, he doesn't have any abilities, and we know how dependent on abilities the pass rush was last season. I don't think it'll be quite as dependent this season, but that's still pretty unfortunate from Alex's perspective. So that may be an area where he looks to upgrade. I don't think it's like super necessary right off the bat, but especially if passing is the meta, we know how important pass rush is going to be in that situation. So maybe look to see the right end position. Maybe look to see Jerry Hughes, improved on in future seasons. As far as the projected linebackers go, this is honestly, despite the low overall, I think this is a pretty solid unit here. Of course, Matt Milano, not great, but he does have high play rec and high tackle. He'll be a solid run stopping linebacker at least. He's not bad. He is an expiring contract, and we'll get to that later. But for now, he is a very solid outside linebacker in my opinion. Tremaine Edmonds, the clear highlight here. I believe he's in the 2nd year of his career. He's got pretty much everything you want. Decent for a middle linebacker, decent coverage stats. Very good speed and excel. We know that usering's dead, but at least like the unusered linebackers, I guess Tremaine Edmonds will be flying around the field potentially. Very solid play rec, high change of direction. If he is used, if young Alex does decide to use Tremaine Edmonds as his primary, defensive linebacker, I do think that'll be a pretty solid linebacker to use in the user game. Shout out to Chase. And then AJ Klein, the clear weakness here. He does not really excel in anything that is, given the fact that he's 29, given the fact that he has another 3 years on his contract, that is a piece that I would look to immediately not immediately because I kind of need him this season, but after this season, I would look to, trade him for like a bad draft pick or something, or, look to immediately replace him and just stash him on your bench because AJ Klein is not a starting quality outside linebacker, and that's the clear weakness among this linebacking core for young Alex. In terms of the projected secondary, I mean, we got some goons here in the secondary, man. Tre'Davious White, one of the very best young cornerbacks in the league. You look at all those abilities: shutdown, deep outside KO, acrobat, pick artist. He is going to shut down all of the deep threats. I promise you, with his good, with his very solid physical abilities, with his 5th-ranked man coverage and 9th-ranked zone coverage, with his high play rec, he's going to be a very solid lockdown cornerback moving forward for this Buffalo Bills team. I expect Tre'Davious White to have a very good year, at least season 1, as long as young Alex doesn't fuck it up, which is a big if, honestly. But yeah, those abilities are very helpful. Just looking at the rest of it, Levi Wallace, obviously on an expiring deal, he will be very cheap for one more season, and then I would probably recommend re-signing him, because there's not a ton of depth other than that. But Levi are going to be a very solid number 2 corner there. This is one of the best safety duos in the league, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. I think only the Vikings and one of the teams I'm forgetting. Whatever, I'm not going to think about it too much. I think they're number 3 in the league in terms of safety duos. Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. Of course, both of them are 29. Poyer at least is going to regress pretty hard after this season. I don't know about Micah Hyde because he does have superstar dev, so we'll see about that. But they are going to be, just a ball-hawking safety duo back there. Very high zone coverage, both of them. Of course, Micah Hyde does have that medium KO, which means that, any route in between 10 and 20 yards, he's going to be clamping the heck up. And then just like Tre'Davious White, he's got that pick artist. And one thing I didn't realize until today when I did the research on it is pick artist gives you unlimited stamina on interception returns. So you can just hold right trigger the whole time and just weave around, and that's a near guaranteed touchdown. So try not to throw picks to White or Hyde, y'all. Just a recommendation in that regard. But this is a very solid secondary, clearly the highlight in the Buffalo Bills defense. I'm very excited to see what young Alex can do, and he's going to need it with Ocho and Austin in his division. Those are 2 very, very strong passers of the ball, and it's good that young Alex has this secondary because I think this may end up being the most important defensive unit in Madden 21, and young Alex is a very solid base to move off of here in the future. In terms of top 3 positives and top 3 negatives for this Buffalo Bills defense, they have impact rookies and second-year players in the front 7. Think of AJ Epinesa, think of Ed Oliver, think of Tremaine Edmonds, for that matter. I mean, those are all, very, very young players, either 21 or 22 years old, who are going to be able to be devved for really nearly the rest of the cycle here, and they're all very solid, year 1 instant starters, instant contributors, for the Buffalo Bills. So, as we see a couple of those older pieces start to regress, you can expect to see these impact rookies, these impact second-year players fill in the gaps behind them. So, again, a very solid base for young Alex to build off of here. Again, I mentioned that they're a top 3 safety duo, the free safety and strong safety, Micah Hyde and Jordan. But in general, just a ball-hawking secondary. Again, 2 of them have that pick artist ability, which is going to be very difficult to contain, at least offensively moving forward. And they're going to get a lot of picks. They're going to create a lot of turnovers, cause a lot of havoc. And again, young Alex is going to need that havoc against this schedule that he's going against, which I will get to in a little bit here. And again, youth at all 3 levels. I've mentioned the impact rookies and second-year players in the front 7. Of course, their number 1 cornerback is also only 25, and they've got youth at all 3 levels. It's a very impressive base to build off of here for this Buffalo Bills team. As far as the negatives go, their linebacking core is generally mediocre. I do think it's a little bit better than their overalls might indicate, but that's not really saying much. And then they have no depth whatsoever. If one of them goes down, if one of them gets an extended injury, it is a pretty big drop off after that. I'm talking mid-60s overalls, 66, 65, something like that, as well as old too. There's really no benefit from that perspective. So the linebacking core is definitely the clear weakness here. As far as, year 1 skill goes. They do have pricey multi-year contracts for regressing talent. You look at a lot of those players who are, approaching 30, 28, 29, etc. They are a lot of them are just on multi-year contracts. I mean, some of them don't expire until 2023. You got some guys on 3-year contracts who are going to be immediately regressing. I mean, Jerry Hughes is an example of one of those guys who, he's, if I remember correctly, 32, definitely over 30, and he's still got a 3-year contract. So that is something that young Alex is going to have to figure out in terms of, how aggressively he wants to purge that out of his roster. And then finally, the third negative is specifically against the pass. The defensive line is pretty bad. I mean, all 4 of them really, specialize in run stopping. It's not a great pass rush by any perspective. I do think that Epinesa can potentially be devved into a pretty solid pass rusher, and then Jerry Hughes, not horrible by any stretch, but you have to say the clear weakness here is against the pass, and I do worry about that. The secondary can't do it all. The secondary can't cover these receivers for a million years, so I do worry about the ability to generate pressure from young Alex's perspective. We'll see what he's able to do there, whether he dials up a lot of blitzes, etc. In terms of cap space and expiring contracts, and this is the first time ever where this has been completely accurate, once again, thank you, Ben. Their total cap space is very high. They're in the top 10 in the league. They have over $24 million to play with, and that's a good thing because I do think they should immediately re-sign Matt Milano. Now, I was just talking about how poor the linebacking core is, but, unless young Alex ends up with a top 10 pick, or he's able to, trade for a truly disruptive outside linebacker, I do think it's going to be important that he re-signs Milano at least for another couple years because, again, as I just mentioned, the depth is really, really poor in Buffalo, in the linebacking core. So I do think, depending on how the offseason plays out, depending on how free agency shakes out, whether he's able to make any moves in the trade market at any point, it's possible that Matt Milano is going to end up being a critical re-signing here for this Buffalo Bills team. As far as the medium priority players go, I have 3 here. I mean, I think they're all medium priority for different reasons. Levi Wallace, the clear second best cornerback, other than a decrepit one whose name I'm forgetting, but he's got another one who's like 33 years old, and I'm not even gonna worry about that guy. But Levi Wallace, the clear, again, second best cornerback, pretty much solid in all stats, pretty well rounded all the way around. So I do think it's not absolutely imperative that you re-sign him because decent depth from the secondary perspective, but I do think Levi Wallace will be very helpful to use moving forward. Dion Dawkins, again, the tackle depth is poor. It's not like Dion Dawkins is the best in the world necessarily, but it does have, pretty solid run blocking stats at least, so that might be someone you look to target, especially with, $24 million in cap space. He has the ability to do that. And then Robert Foster, 94 speed. I just think it makes sense to get him at least on a short-term deal to give yourself some depth at the wide receiver position moving forward. I do think, again, we're going to see Foster be the second most effective receiver on this Bills team behind Stephon Diggs. And then as far as the low priority guys go, I mean, John Feliciano just sucks. I mean, I'm not even going to bring that up. And then you do have both of the backups, TJ Yeldon and Tywan Jones, on expiring contracts. It's probably going to make sense to re-sign one of them. I don't know which one necessarily, which is why I put them both on low priority. There are definitely arguments to be made for both. But again, I do think if I were young Alex, I would be immediately targeting the halfback position in either free agency or, if it comes down to it, the draft moving forward. So I see them both as low priority as a result of that. Hopefully don't need to re-sign them. This is the schedule projection here for the Buffalo Bills. I have them going 4-12, and I know that young Alex is in a fit of rage right now. I think he thinks I'm trolling, and I promise you I'm not, because young Alex, this is not an indictment on you as a user, but your schedule is among the most brutal I think I have ever seen in the Better League. I feel bad for you, and I feel bad for Nico, because when you break down these games, I mean, again, I even gave you the toss-up. I even gave you a win against Phil's Denver Broncos, which I think at this point is more of a toss-up than anything. But, I mean, if he's locked in, that's probably a loss too. But you look at the other teams you're playing here. Jesse's Pittsburgh Steelers just made the playoffs, just won a playoff game. I think he's definitively a better user. King's LA Rams, again, former Super Bowl contender. King, a very solid user in all categories, and I do think King is in a slightly better roster position potentially than you are, at least year one. I have that as a likely loss. Lucky Seattle Seahawks, lucky just, damn near won a division with Ocho and Ben in it. I have that as a likely loss. Clouds Arizona Cardinals, Cloud, a very solid user, likely loss. Morty, I mean, frankly, that should be a sure loss if Morty, is able to regain his Madden 18 form, and then the form that I found, making it to the AFC Championship Madden 20. That could very well be a sure loss. I have it as a likely loss because I think that's a bit of a question mark, but regardless. And then you look at the sure losses. I mean, you've got Austin twice, you've got Ocho twice. I don't even need to speak on those. You have Kansas City, you have Chase and Alex, the other Alex, the good Alex, and then Ben's San Francisco 49ers. Again, Alex, this is not an indictment of you as a user. Please remember this. If this were a different season, if you weren't playing the two best divisions in if you weren't playing the two best divisions in the AFC West and the NFC West in out of division games, as well as, again, Ocho twice and Austin twice, I'd have you with a way better record than this. I think you're a way better user than a 4-12 record indicates, but I just don't think this is your season. I think it's gonna be a pretty rough season one, again, purely based on the schedule. But that's fine because, again, Buffalo, you got a lot of young talent to play around with. This is not a win-now situation roster-wise, so, that defense is going to look a lot better year two. Josh Allen, that's another year of development for him, so solid stuff there. I do think year two, young Alex will be a lot more likely to truly compete, potentially for a wild card berth in the AFC, but year one, it's not happening purely because of the schedule. This is my threat level scale. You've heard me give this spiel 3 times now, so I will not give it again. I think the question is, do I give young Alex a 4 or a 5? I'm done with the 0.5s. I already regret that from Cloud's video. I'm going to give everyone a whole number on the 1 through 7 scale. And I did end up leaning to a 4. I do think young Alex does potentially have playoff aspirations. I saw flashes of brilliance from him last year, and that was, the first year I remember seeing young Alex really compete in the Better League. That may have been, if I remember correctly, his first, full season in a Madden CFM, or at least in the Better League, from what I remember. He is definitely a user that has the stick skills to potentially make the playoffs. This scale is in a vacuum. Yes, get your memes off. The scale's in a vacuum. It's not, really dependent on who's in your division or what schedule you are, etc. It's just against an average generic schedule, how likely are you to compete is essentially what this scale is. And again, I think young Alex is at a 4. I do think he can potentially make the playoffs at some point, and even maybe get a playoff run, a miniature playoff run, if he ends up with the right schedule and the right situation. But I can't call him a playoff contender because we just haven't seen that. So a 4 it is for young Alex. I think that's fair. I don't think that can really be argued against, quite frankly. Don't argue against it, young Alex, or I'll put you at a fucking 7 next time, dude. I don't give a damn. The beautiful Buffalo. Sorry, I couldn't say that without laughing. It's Buffalo. You know how it is. I used to live in New York City, and Buffalo was always seen as the yeah. But regardless, thank you so much, guys. Again, please give me feedback. Please give me tips on, what segments you want to see added, removed, etc. I can do the same format 32 times and be fine with it, but I don't want this to get stale. So please give me, please let me know what you want to see from this series moving forward, and I will make it happen. But for now, as always, I'm your humble host, Connor Rice. Peace.